2, 1.
Blast off. It's 4 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Can we go ahead and do the roll call, please?
David Nigro,
Present.
Diane Douglas,
Present by proxy, Mike Manley.
William Gibney,
Here.
Michael Gordon,
I'm here.
Dean Howard,
Here.
Mark Sims,
Here.
Suke Kneifel,
Here.
Shelley Herbold,
Here.
and Lynn Davison is present.
So Superintendent Douglas has had a prior commitment, so she sent a representative. Mike, could you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background and what you do?
Sure. My name is Mike Manley. I'm currently the Associate Superintendent of Highly Effective Schools, which encompasses, among other things, exceptional student services. My background is largely special education related, former special ed director and former special ed teacher and elementary school principal, among other things. But I'm happy to be here, and hopefully we can move things along.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
I appreciate you for coming and representing for Superintendent Douglas. Okay. 1.02, information items, student presentation. Dr. Rex?
Good afternoon, Board. I'd like to introduce our principal of ASB and our interim principal of ASD. So our ASDB Tucson principal, Ms. Kelly Creasy, to give you a report.
Good afternoon, Board President Sims, Superintendent Reichman, Dr. Rex, and members of the board. I have a video that I would like to share with you today. As you watch, I'll be describing what you are seeing. On April 26th, students and staff from the Tucson campus were invited to participate in the Watermark Retirement Community's annual directors meeting at the JW Marriott Star Pass Hotel. This meeting takes place over several days and brings together directors of Watermark Retirement Communities from all over the country. 16 of our students, with the support of their teachers, led sessions on ASL, deaf culture, low vision, braille, and orientation and mobility. Students taught the directors how to sign the Watermark slogan, creating extraordinary communities where people thrive, along with other basic signs and phrases. Students also led the directors through low vision stimulations, where they had to send and receive a text message while wearing goggles that simulated various eye conditions. While wearing the goggles, the directors also had to spread peanut butter and crackers, cut an apple, complete a worksheet, and pour a glass of water. Students and staff introduced the group to Braille, tactile sensitivity, and the Perkins Braille Writer. The directors also got to try their cane skills. While walking through an obstacle course designed by students, they learned how to select an appropriate size cane and proper cane technique. One of the other activities was for the directors to assemble 14 BMX and 2 tandem bikes. These bikes, along with a generous donation of $2,500, were donated to the school by Watermark. This was an empowering experience for our students. They were the teachers, and they had a captive audience of adults who wanted to learn from them and about them. In just one afternoon, powerful connections were made, and it is an experience that all of us who participated in it will never forget. Thank you.
Thank you. That was very nice. Any other comments? All right. Section 1.04, information and discussion, executive team reports. First up, business services. Richard Valdivia.
Board President Sims, Superintendent Reichman, Dr. Rex, you have my board report before you and a copy of the JLBC report of what our projected budget is for next year. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them, or if you'd like any additional details.
Richard, you had, is the voucher the ESA?
The voucher is the voucher that we get for special ed students. I'm not, so for the Exceptional Student Services voucher, it's actually approved by the Exceptional Student Services Division, which Mr. Manley oversees.
So be nice to him.
Go ahead.
No, I'm kidding.
Well, he's the one that has to approve it, and the kids that are vouchered, and then it goes through school finance, and then we receive it. So that is where it comes from. The dollars that from the voucher come both to our School for the Deaf and the Blind Fund and to our cooperatives fund. Those kids are serviced. Both of those kids are funded via the voucher. Any other questions at all?
Any other questions on the budget?
So the board has previously indicated they'd like to understand where the dollars come from, and that's what I tried to do in this report. And by providing a copy of the GLBC report, I tried to provide similar information. And if you get time to look at it, if you have any questions at all, I believe you have my contact information, and I'd be glad to spend any time necessary to go over it with you.
Great. And we'll have that committee report later in the agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Human Resources, Anita P.
Good afternoon, Board President Sims, members of the board, Superintendent Reichman, and Dr. Rex. Before you have my HR report, I'd like to take a couple minutes to highlight a few items. Last report, I talked about a limited edition pin that we had the students design, and our winner was Jose Lopez from the ASD High School. That pin will help us raise money for our staff recognition events that we have throughout the year. I'd also like to focus on some of the staff recognition events we did before the end of the school year. We did a Tucson campus event where we had Truly Nolan come out, and they were provided hot dogs for all the staff on the Tucson campus. We also, at the end of May, went to each of the cooperatives and contributed to their end of year meetings. At this time, I'd like to make myself available for any questions that you may have.
Any questions? How much is the pin?
$10.
Okay.
Yes, I do have a question. I do see a lot of vacancies listed here, and I'm wondering what your plans are to advertise and recruit for those positions to make sure we have good quality staff.
Sure. So currently our applet track system posts to over 50 websites automatically. In addition, this past school year, we also attended job fairs. I don't have that list in front of me, but I can send that out to you. We went to the university in Texas, California. We've also went to the job fairs here in Arizona for the universities here. We also attend we'll be attending I think it's the WEIC conference in the next week. But we are actively recruiting for our positions that we have available. In addition, I'd like to make you aware that we just hired Heather Barnhart, who will be our recruitment specialist. She just started on Monday, so we're excited about that as well.
Okay, and I do have a second question as well. I do want to make sure that you include Gallaudet University as well, NTID, all of that. Just include those deaf universities. One other thing that I noticed, number 1244, for math teachers, it says in Phoenix, but it says at ASD. So I'm not sure if that's a mistake there, so you might want to just double check, just to make sure it's the right location.
That is a typo, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the report. Next is Paul Creasy, Information Technology.
Good afternoon, Board President Sims, members of the board, Superintendent Reichman, Assistant Superintendent Rex. I've provided you in your board packets the IT department report, and at this time I'd like to take the opportunity to highlight one of the items in the board report, and that is that we're well on our way of moving all our critical services into the cloud, And in order to make that happen, we have to take some steps right now in order to increase the bandwidth that we have. And one way we are able to, or are hoping to fund that project, will be through E-rate. And I've included that information in your board packets. This July, we should have completed our migration of the agency's email over to Office 365. And that's the first step in this process. At this time, I'd like to make myself available for any questions you might have.
Mr. Creasy,
Yes, sir.
in the board report, you mentioned that you're going to increase the bandwidth from 100 megabit to 200 megabit. Is that just within state resources, or is that also to outside internet as well?
So that is state resources and also our internet, because we have two separate pipes. For our instructional agency, we're going through Cox, and then for the agency side of the network, we're having to go through ASNet. We have to segregate those connections because of the state requirements. We need more flexibility on the instructional side.
Okay. Are there plans, once the move of the production email environment is complete to the cloud, are there plans to increase the bandwidth to the outside internet to accommodate the additional traffic that'll come from that?
Absolutely. At this point, what we've been working on diligently is working with the state's project management team in order to get the best pricing possible to lower the cost of increasing that bandwidth. Right now, the state's having working through some challenges on their end in order to be able to get gigabit access and our capabilities. And so with that, our instructional actually has more bandwidth capability than our agency side at this time.
Oh, okay. Have you done any testing, performance testing with the existing bandwidth of the outside internet to see what performance would be like were we not able to complete those upgrades?
At this time, we do have monitoring software working through the state themselves, and we don't really hit any spikes at all at this time on this on the current bandwidth that we have. But as we're trying to offload a lot of our capabilities to the cloud, such as storage and moving more of those critical services out there, we do realize that that might have an impact down the road, but at this time there isn't been any impact at all.
Okay.
But it's for moving it up to identify and to be able to see what the difference is going to be. We haven't done that yet, no.
What are the next critical resources that are going to be migrated to the cloud?
So at this time, the next step would be moving like our DNS servers, our Active Directory structure, moving those most of the critical components to the cloud. So everything we need to run the network and our infrastructure for communication to occur. One reason we're having to do that is mitigate the increased amount of threat that we're receiving, and most state agencies are receiving in the form of malware and also ransomware. And so by making this jump, it actually will decrease a lot of the risk that we're having to take with hosting our own in our data centers.
Right. Are there any plans to move, document management systems to the cloud as well?
So we've already started rolling out in the structure of SharePoint services. So with that increase, that's the next logical step for us to move a lot of our internal network connections that you can only get while on our network, such as our shared document folders, our department folders, and by making it available through SharePoint would also increase productivity and limit the exposure we have as far as not being able to be on get those resources when not being on the network and such.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is Instructional Report, Dr. Kristen Rex.
President Sim, board members, after the last 2 weeks of May, whirlwind graduations, into school activities, ASDB statewide is far from moving slow. This summer, we have a lot of active teachers and adults working on some projects. I hope you had a chance to read over my report, and I'd like to focus on the literacy and language workshop, where we have some curriculum resource specialists working with teachers to work on kindergarten and first grade materials and adapting those materials so they can be used to teach all of our deaf, hard of hearing students. We also, based upon survey need, discovered that the itinerant world teachers needed support as well. So based upon those surveys, we are creating some short online videos to support our itinerant teachers out in their service areas. And we're taking some of our own ASDB top itinerant teachers to help respond to the survey needs. But probably most excited, I am wanting to focus on next week's summer transition camp that's going to be held at the Tucson campus. We have a 2-week summer transition camp where vocational rehabilitation and eligible deaf, hard of hearing, and deafblind campers are going to receive specialized transition from school to work and leadership programming. So I look forward to presenting that to you at the next meeting. Any questions?
Yes, I do have a question. This is Shelley. I have a question about the itinerant teachers and the supports that they need. What types of the support were they mentioning? Do you have any examples?
Itinerant teachers go in and they work with specific students based on the IEP goals. So when you have a brand new teacher that comes out, they need a lot of help and support learning how to manage their caseloads and going into different schools and building those relationships, working one-on-one with students, being a part of the IEP process. They're not in one safe section or one school, rather they're spread out, and those itinerant teachers have to learn about that time management piece and being able to provide in a short amount of time the quality instruction that those students would need.
Great, thank you.
Busy summer. Enjoy the rest.
Indeed.
Any other questions or comments? Next up is media and communications. Ryan?
Board President, members of the board, Superintendent Reichman, Assistant Superintendent Kristen Rex. In your packets, you should have received a copy of my board report. And before I entertain any questions, I'd like to highlight a couple of key things that I think are pretty notable. Number one, we nearly reached 500,000 impressions through social media, which is remarkable because we only have like a couple thousand followers for the agency. So in order to reach that, we've had to have like hundreds and hundreds of shares of our content. One of our videos, which demonstrates ASD graduates signing the national anthem, has reached over 60,000 views across the deaf community alone, so we're very proud of that. On general traditional media, we've reached about 100,000 through radio ads, newspapers, columns, op-eds, articles, things like that. The other thing that I'd like to report progress on is we have a goal in the media department to become the most accessible website for deaf and blind populations in the world. And we made great strides to do that. As of today, every video we have posted is accessible in ASL, English voice, captioning, and where applicable, audio description for the blind and visually impaired. We're very proud of that fact. Every photo has alt tags. ADA has reviewed our site through Amsterdam OCR. They say we have one of the best that they've come across in their auditing, so we're very proud of that. So there's a couple of things I'd like to highlight. At this time, I'd like to answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Chairman,
Yep, go ahead.
can you hear me okay? Ryan, quick question on item it's not a number, under March through May activities on the editorial that was placed in the Arizona Republic. I choose to get my news from other sources in the Arizona Republic, so I didn't actually see that. Is there a way I can get a copy of that?
Yeah, I can actually forward you the electronic link to that article.
Okay.
It was a very powerful editorial that was written by Superintendent Reichman, and I kind of begged, pleaded, convinced, cajoled the editorial board there to put in the Sunday paper for maximum exposure, and it was very successful in influencing legislators to consider our ECFE legislative request, and it came very close to having that be realized.
Go ahead.
And Ryan, I contacted you, but I did hear the story on NPR
Oh,
as I
great,
was
yeah.
driving from school to school, and it was very nicely done.
I really enjoyed that story. I want to give a lot of credit to Jay McDonald and Danielle Cummings for helping me to set up the staff by which the NPR reporter shadowed, but even more importantly to the students that were interviewed and the parent who really testified to the power that our co-ops, perform for their kids every day and really the life-changing work that they perform out there in the regions of Arizona. And so if you haven't had an opportunity to hear it, let me know and I will forward you the link to that as well.
I wanted to go ahead and thank you so much for sharing all the information, all the news and media outlets, all the articles. I really appreciate that, and I want to thank you for sharing that with us. I don't always, follow what's happening on the news or TV, so I do appreciate you sending that along to us. I do have a question. Are there any plans to do some type of video explaining what ASDB is really all about, what we have to offer? Many are aware, even though they're in a co-op, they don't always understand that they're connected with ASDB. So is there any plans for that type of a video?
That's an excellent question. That's actually a current initiative for my team. As we strive to be the most accessible website and agency, one of our initiatives actually is for the entire website to have a series of video ASL tooltips, we call it, whereas in every section, we've already started this process. You click on it. For instance, when you get to the About ASDB section on the website, it's now in our staging area. We haven't finalized it, but when it goes live, you'll be able to click on that and see an ASL video, which describes that section. We hope to do that throughout the entire website to be fully accessible to the ASL community. So I'm glad you asked that. That's actually coming down the pipe. Just for your edification, every survey I send out externally has ASL and captioning to ensure it has full accessibility for the communities that take the survey.
All right, super.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your kind comments.
Ryan, I just wanted to add the kudos for the accessibility level that you guys have gone to. I think that's awesome.
Thank you.
So Ryan, I have a couple of requests. So
Sure.
can you send out to all the board members, link to the editorial,
Yes.
link to the NPR,
Uh-huh.
link to the Facebook ASL, and a link to the report on the early childhood birth to 3 survey that you have on here too?
Sure. No, those are reports for the ECFE survey that I generally send to administration.
Yep.
But if you'd like me to provide some information on that?
That'd be great.
Sure.
And then the only other question I have, and I don't know how you fix this, but the interpreter with the green sheet, their eyes keep on turning black. They get big spotches of black. It's okay, but you need to figure out technically something to do with that. Like it's,
I think he's getting a
Yeah,
reflection
reflection
of that
stuff.
screen.
Well, I guess it's better than having pink eye go across the board and spread. But I'll go ahead and I'll talk to my media team to see if we can resolve that.
yeah, it's just, they get these big black spotches.
Yeah, it's kind of distracting.
Oh,
Anyway.
okay.
No.
All right. Anything else?
Have a great day.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Next report is operations. Terry Pritchard.
Good evening, Board President Sims, members of the board, Superintendent Reichman, Dr. Rex. Before you have my board report, before I entertain questions, I'd like to just highlight a couple of items. One is we've got a new transportation manager, started about 2 weeks ago. She comes with 30 years of experience in school transportation. She also sits on the Transportation the Advisory Board with DPS and other school districts. We also have the Tucson Fire Alarm Project is still going strong down in Tucson. And can I entertain any questions?
And the freezers replaced.
And the freezers, yes, that is.
Any questions? No, thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
Yes, I do have a
Oh,
question.
sorry.
I'm sorry. Let's see. Miss Espino, is she here? I would just like to meet her.
She is. She's right back there. Please stand up. Sorry.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're not sure if that introduction means a good thing or a bad thing. We'll wait and see. Next is agency report, Superintendent Reichman.
Good afternoon, President Sims and members of the board. I have several things I want to point out to you. The first thing we've already talked about is the request for $800,000 for ECFE funding. We didn't get that, but not for the lack of making the effort. You'll see attached to my report is a 2-pager sheet that Ryan and Maria put together that really details and to the point about the need for the early intervention. So if you have the opportunity to read that, take a look at that. We will be using that and make the effort to do it again next year. The second thing I want to talk about is we've started the strategic planning. When we have the retreat right after this meeting, I will go more in depth about the strategic planning. Really want to include you in that discussion. We had hoped to do that on the April 29th meeting, which got canceled. So we have already started moving forward internally. But hopefully this evening we'll have the opportunity to get you up to speed and talk about that. But with the strategic planning, we have already decided on 3 operating principles. That is basically how we will do business. And they are accountability, collaboration, and transparency. And if you put those 3 together, it becomes ACT, how we will act. So in order to develop trust in our interaction with each other and with external stakeholders, we will be making decisions and interacting on that includes accountability, the collaboration, and transparency. And I will talk about that more at the retreat. With the strategic initiatives, we have 3 things that we're putting in place, and they're just very broad domains. One is leadership, second is learning, and third is resources. It's more like building a frame of a house. We haven't put in the walls, we haven't put in the carpet, we haven't put in the bathroom, we haven't done any of that. We're just setting up the frame based on a foundation of trust. And again, I'll be talking about that more during the retreat. The third thing that I didn't put in writing, but I just wanted to catch you up on, Kelly, can you stand up for a minute? Kelly Creasy, who is the principal of ASB, as of mid-May, she also became the acting principal of ASD. And just wanted to let you know that was happening. We have advertised. We've gotten applications. We set up a screening committee. The screening committee looked at the applications and decided none were worth interviewing. And rather than accepting good enough, we really want to either grow internally the best leader possible or to recruit someone into the position that have the leadership qualifications that we need. So in the interim, we have to have someone who is acting as a principal. So this is Kelly Creasy. She's the acting principal of ASD. She's taking on a lot of work. Just wanted to acknowledge that, and I hope that you have the opportunity to get to know her. She will be sitting in on our retreat for a while as well. And that's my report.
Any questions or comments?
I would just say it's unfortunate that the legislature didn't pick up the early childhood piece. That's an absolute need, and thank you for attempting that, and that's something that we can never stop trying to get.
Okay, any other comments? Thank you. All right, next to 2.01, consent agenda items, approval of the consent agenda consistent with board policies to include items 3.01, 3.02, 4.01, 5.01, 5.03, 6.03, and 6.05.
Mr. President, can we remove 3.02 from the consent agenda?
So motion to remove 3.02 from the consent agenda. I second.
One question here. I'm not sure, 5.01, what was that one?
Mark Sims.
I'd like some more explanation about that,
So-
maybe we could hold that one out as well.
You would like 5.01 removed from the consent agenda as well?
Yes, please.
Okay.
5.01 and 3.02.
Any other? Do we have a motion?
I move that we remove 5.02 and 3.02 from the consent agenda.
I think it was 5.01.
Sorry, 5.0, I move that,
Correct.
stand corrected. I move that we remove 3.02 and 5.01 from the consent agenda.
Okay. Second.
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, so now we have a motion to approve 3.01, 4.01, 5.03, 6.03, and 6.05.
So moved.
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, so, moving to 3.02, consent agenda item. That's what the document on the table is referring to, I assume, Terry.
Yes, sir. I also brought some other handouts, which is the fair market value report that I just got before the board meeting.
So you might have anticipated this wasn't gonna get through this consent agenda.
Yes, sir.
That's wisdom.
She's handing that out. I'll kind of go over a little brief description of what's been going on. Before you have a right-of-way request for an approval from Mini Mesa Mobile, or Mini Mesa Solar, from the Arizona State Land Department. This was previously approved at the September 10th, 2015 board meeting. Apparently, Mesa Mini decided to wait until they got some clients for their electricity. And in the time that they were waiting, they also lost their contractor. So they had to come back to State Land Department, who is now sending it back under a different right-of-way. There have been a few questions that have been asked, which is, one, how do they come up with all their numbers, which is, I got this from the State Land Department, which is their State Land Policy Memo P97-1, which gives all the numbers that are on the front page of the right-of-way recommendation. If anybody has any questions, I know that in the future, if the board wishes, I can always send copies of the proposal to, I know David Nigro has asked questions about it.
Well, I would just have Leticia attach it as an attachment to the agenda, and then people can look at it if they so choose. That would be the most efficient way to do it, rather than individually send to board members.
Okay.
So, any questions or issues?
I do have a question. So I just wanted to know what changes. Are there any new, and is there any new information that might impact our decision? Because we previously voted to approve that, and I know that there was something holding off. Is Is there anything different this time that they're proposing, or is it exactly as was?
No, it actually has gone up in value. They redid the fair market value and it went up a couple $100.
And just to be clear, this is for right away for some overhead power lines to be put on this particular property, in addition to some fiber optic lines that will also be overhead for a term of 9 years. Is that correct?
I believe it's 29 years.
And that's okay, because and I guess the reason I asked that is in some of the supplementary information that you provided just prior to the meeting today, there's the formula for determining the value, and those are things like the fair market value, the use factor, which is 50% here, and I think we have some documentation in this supplementary material as to why overhead power lines, should be worth 50%, relative to the fair market value of the fee simple parcel. But the term factor, there's a list of factors corresponding to terms. 9 years is 0.5759, and 29 years, if I can find it on the sheet, is 0.9396. I believe in the documentation that was submitted in the agenda, the calculations were done with I'm trying to locate it here now, but I believe it was done with a 9-year term. So I'm wondering if I'm missing something here, or why that different term factor was used as opposed to the 29-year.
It's a 9, 10, 10 lease, right? So they're doing the first 9 and then they're breaking it down rather than the full thing, I believe.
Okay, so there'd be future
Right, so
payments
if you
later.
look here, it's basically 9 payments and then 2 10-year payments, so they do it in 3 different installments.
And, right, in 3 different, okay, so that's why they're using the form factor. Okay.
Thank you.
Which I think gives them the right to say, I don't want the 10, I'll pay once.
Right.
This didn't pan out.
Okay.
Paul Creasy's need for internet wasn't so great that they had to keep those overhead data. Any other questions?
I move to grant the right-of-way as presented to us by Mr. Pritchard.
I second that.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Item 5.01, reduction in professional staff workforce, Assistant Regional Director position, Superintendent Reichman.
I'm gonna ask Justin to come forward. Justin Rice is the Regional Director, Desert Valley Regional Cooperative.
Hello.
I understand that the justification for the reduction in professional staffing for the Assistant Regional Director position was included in your board packets. If there are any questions that I might answer, I'm happy to do so.
Yes, I'm sorry, I have a question. So it's a reduction. Can you explain just a little bit more about that and the reasoning why?
Of course.
And the effect it might have?
Of course. Well, within the agency, we do have the 5 regional cooperatives, as you know. Only one cooperative, being Desert Valley's Regional Cooperative, has the Assistant Regional Director position. This position is a part-time position. This was created by the director prior to me. At the same time when all other part-time positions within the agency were being eliminated. So this was kind of a special unicorn position, if you will. At this time, what we're discovering is that our budget is essentially flat. and yet our needs continue to grow. At this time, we have 6 additional charter and member districts that are wishing to join Desert Valleys Regional Cooperative, which would equate to approximately 50 new students at this time. With a flat budget, what we require are additional teaching positions. Unfortunately, those monies are not available to add those teaching positions. So, at Desert Valleys Regional Cooperative, our motto is keeping students at the heart of every decision. So, while the decision is a difficult one, in order to free up additional funding so that we may hire new teachers in order to meet the needs of the students in our member districts and charters, this was a solution that was come to in terms of eliminating the position of assistant regional director, and in doing so, 1, freeing up those funds, but 2, providing the current assistant regional director with the opportunity to return to the classroom, so a position is available, so that she may serve our students directly.
Can you help me with the math? So how many students are you servicing right now?
We have 428 students right now.
And what's your budget?
Our budget at this time, Richard, do you have our direct number?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's okay. Sorry, since we're switching fiscal years.
No, I know, but so you have 450 students, is that what you said?
I don't have the numbers, Dr. Sims, but I can get them for you. I don't have them right here.
Well, I know it's not as simple as doing it pro
Yeah.
rata, but on a pro rata basis, then, you know, you're looking at a,
Agency-wide, we spend about $14,000, almost $15,000 per student, but that goes all the way from early childhood.
no, but I'm talking about her particular program. If she sees a 50 student jump on a pro rata basis, if you take what you're spending per student, she needs, let's say it's a $500 a student, you need 50 times $500 more dollars for her to be able to service her people, right? I mean, am I missing? So we have to figure out how to get those resources to where she is. So, absent me knowing what her budget is, it's hard for me to suggest her resource needs. Does that make sense? I know that's not the particular consent agenda item, but you know, as an issue of discussion. Does that make sense? You see what I'm saying? Like, so if it's, I don't know, let's say this is simple math, but let's say it's $45,000. That's $450,000. That's $1,000 per student. If she has 50 more students, she needs another $50,000.
Let me jump in, Dr. Sims. We are well aware of what you just described,
Right.
and that's an internal discussion. We're trying to figure out
Well,
how to
internal is us.
better allocate
That's us. We are internal.
and adapt our resources to address exactly that. We have a similar issue with the early childhood family education, where that program is growing, and again, having those discussions about our resources. So this is just a part-time position that we're asking to eliminate, but it's also part of a larger issue, picture here, if you will, that you just touch upon.
Right, but I guess I'm hitting on an overall philosophical concept, you know. If a family makes a certain amount of money and they incur more expenses, there's 2 things you can do. You can increase your revenue, which is very difficult, or you can allocate your monies differently. And we can keep on knocking on the door of the legislature and keep on knocking loudly, but I'm doubtful in this fiscal environment that you're going to see that necessarily come through. So we're going to have to talk more as a whole agency about redistribution of resources, and that's really
what is the salary of the assistant director? How much would we be saving?
Her salary is approximately $36,000 a year.
Is that enough to service 500 more students?
No.
Or 50 more students?
50 more students,
Yeah,
no.
Right, okay.
No, but that would be enough to service 25.
Right.
Okay, great.
It's a start.
It is. Thank you.
Thank
Any other
you.
questions? I'm sorry, any other questions? Mike?
This is Gordon. Excuse me. I'm looking through the vacancy list from the HR report. It's about 2.5 pages of vacancies right here, which is obviously hundreds and thousands of dollars worth of of unoccupied positions right here. I'm not saying that I'm certainly here at this table to help support the administration as they make decisions that are for the well-being of the agency. First of all, I'm a little curious, as this does not seem like it's necessarily board matter, so to speak, but I'm not really discussing that right here, but with all the vacancies, with, as Dr. Sims just said, with, trying to address the reallocation of funds to really serve people, and like you said, with just knowing what it costs to serve people effectively, 50 students for trying to fill that with one part-time position, that doesn't really seem like that's an effective strategy. So I'm just kind of curious how we got to this place as compared to trying to maybe brainstorm other opportunities for personnel options, let's say. I don't even know if that's a question or more of just a statement. As I'm
Right.
looking at this is something that, any administrator deals with to a certain level, not necessarily to their board, but also for two reasons. One being, it doesn't seem like it's necessarily to be elevated to that type of decision-making. Secondly, eliminating a part-time position to try to serve students, again, does not seem like it's necessarily the only option that might be available. Again, not really a question.
Right. It's that allocation resources that you had mentioned. We're trying to reallocate our resources back into the students first.
I
And this is
understand
an opportunity to do it. DVR feels that they can provide the service in the administration using less help in the office and more help out on the street. That's kind of what it came down to. And it's not a personal thing at all, it's a position.
No, I would hope it wouldn't be personal.
Not at all.
Right.
What do we lose by not having that assistant?
Well, if I may, one thing that we did need to do, due to our increase in student membership over the course of this school year, was we did need to reclassify our assistant regional director back into the classroom in order to meet those students' needs. So that was one way that we did to address those student needs. Essentially, by doing so, Desert Valleys Regional Cooperative as a group was forced to look very, very critically at our operations to help streamline things, to make things more efficient. And that's exactly what we did, while still maintaining the same level of customer service. One thing that we did operationally was looked at the skill sets of those that were within our office and start reallocating some of those responsibilities to the appropriate parties. This provided us with an opportunity for cross-training, but also to realize skills and interests that staff may never have had the opportunity to bring forth. So essentially what we were able to do was find a better way. We were able to find a way to do more with less. And based on that level of success, that's one reason why we are coming today to look at a reallocation of our resources, because what we found was that we are able to increase efficiency, and again, like I said, to do more with less.
Any other questions or comments? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
I move to accept 5.01.
Second.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
So, next is 5.02, information item, superintendent's resolution report regarding the board appeal.
Yes, President Sims, In your documents, you see sort of a brief description of what happened with the recent appeal to the board by Michael Atwood. We did ultimately settle, and I described that in the last paragraph. So if you have any questions for me.
That's the total term of the settlement, what's described there.
Yes, yeah, you see that last paragraph? The settlement agreement is that in lieu of termination, that we would accept this employee's resignation with the understanding that this person could never apply for a position at ASDB ever again.
Okay, thank you. Next is information item, Policy Revision Committee and the Finance Subcommittees. David, do you have anything to report? You're not obliged to.
In the interim since the last meeting, Suke and I met. We discussed kind of our goals for the committee, and we worked through some of the upcoming policies with Ms. Murphy in preparation for this meeting, and that's where we are.
Okay. Any bumps in the road concerning what's coming up?
Not from my end, Suke.
No.
Okay. All right. And then, Mike, you weren't here at the last one, but you were made head of the Finance Committee. That's what happens when you're not here, man. And it's okay if you haven't met yet.
Well, we met 5 different times, and
nobody else was there.
No one was there, right? No, we haven't met, but I will reach out on behalf of the board and for you, Dr. Sims, and we'll start moving forward with Richard.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, you know, definitely the information Richard's supplying gives us a better understanding. But, you know, obviously, in order to make these hard discussions about resources, we have to understand where they're all going. So, okay, great. Next is 6.02, information item. Introduction and possible discussion of the policies listed in the consent in the agenda. I'm not gonna
Good afternoon, President Sims, board members, Superintendent Reichman, Dr. Rex. This is Maria Murphy, and you have before you the red lines as well as the abstracts. I'd like to report that the policies were posted on the website for public comment. As of 4 o'clock today, I have not received any comments or questions or suggested revisions, and I'm available for any questions at this time.
Any questions? Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. 6.04, update on the ombudsman. Bill, do you have an update for us?
Yeah, briefly. Superintendent Douglas and I met a few weeks ago, and we decided that there needed to be some research done. So I have contacted Anita Pyatt several times. She's been very helpful. And I think we're premature on deciding whether we need to hire an ombudsman. There have only been 3 complaints over the last 2 years. But that may be because people don't know they can file grievances or complaints. We have 4 different policies, and one of the policies is for staff. And so staff is reminded on an annual, when they're hired, and on an annual basis, they're reminded that there is both a grievance and complaint process. But for students and the public, they don't know that they have the ability to file either grievances or complaints. We need to come up with some system to notify the public and students that there is a mechanism for grievances and complaints. And so maybe that needs to be done, and let's see whether grievances and complaints pick up over the next year or two before we engage in actually hiring an ombudsman. The other thing Anita and I found, I believe it's in the staff policy, that I think there's a little conflict, because if a staff has a complaint, the staff reports it to that staff person's supervisor. And we just didn't think that was a very good idea. So maybe we just, and I to drop David, I just always appreciate his legal expertise. I'd love to have him review these policies, to look for legalese, to see if he may have any comment or things that need to be changed. But basically, that's the substance of and I have not even been able to report this to Diane, to Superintendent Douglas, but those were my findings.
So Bill, can I ask a question? When you say there's only been 3 complaints, do you mean there's only been 3 issues that have been complained about, or 3 complaints?
3 complaints.
Okay, so I can tell you via email I received over a dozen. So I think, I just...
Then apparently they didn't go to, through the system, through the HR system.
That's correct.
Right.
So that is an issue in and of itself.
Mhm.
And I think the reason they came to me is because they didn't feel like they could internally get redress, and I think it has to do with who you're supposed to report your complaint to. So I think that's substantive. Certainly.
Because retaliation is part of all the policies, but apparently, people are just not comfortable with who they're reporting to.
Right. And I think you can work with Ryan to increase awareness for the public and students, right, to increase that awareness.
That would be terrific.
Bill, this is David. I'd be happy to look at whatever you'd like.
That'd be great, David. I'd really appreciate it.
So maybe my only comment would be is maybe not contracting one, but it would certainly be helpful if you as a reference would have somebody in your back pocket that if we needed to pull them out relatively expeditiously, there was somebody who was maybe available on a short basis.
I've spoken to 2 different gentlemen, one in Tucson and one in Phoenix, and they would both be interested in helping out on a contract.
Okay, so I think that in and of itself is a good step forward, that we have those resources if we need them, rather than institutionalizing it, just having somebody. Because I think some of the issues that are hopefully long behind us as an agency were due to these exact issues, that people didn't feel that there was a place for them to go where they could get an independent view. And sometimes that might normalize people's complaints, because they might go to somebody who's also very sympathetic to their complaint as their supervisor and stoke the fire, when maybe that's not really what should happen. So it can go both ways. Your complaint can be ignored, or the flames can be fanned by that person. So it's more having somebody outside of it if need be. And I think that might be a resource for the staff, that if they feel, administration feels like it's, getting to, this is a very small, tight community. So, at some point maybe you do need somebody from the outside to have a perspective. So I think that it would be, whether or not it's codified in the agency, it would be definitely a resource that would be very good for the administration to have, that if they thought it was like, okay, why don't we have somebody from outside talk to you guys and see what they bring a fresh perspective. So
what do you want the next step to be?
I want you to fix it all. I would talk to Ryan and review those policies.
Okay.
Dr. Sims?
Yes, sir.
This is Gordon. I don't think I've ever seen a whistleblower policy, and I'm sure that there's one in effect through either HR or ASDB or personnel policies, or, excuse me. I'm sure there's one available. So that would be something I think we should probably have distributed. But just to kind of echo what you said, Mark, any of the complaints or the possible complaints that I think we probably come across the last few years always talked of retaliation and the fear of potential retaliation from kind of a nebulous staff person or administration. So an external ombudsman or someone that can work on as mediation on that behalf is certainly I think, an important piece, particularly with kind of the history
Right.
and some of the culture that still might exist a bit.
So this is Shelley. I would like to make a comment as well. A small concern that I do have related to deaf or deaf culture. Sometimes an outside person is unaware or uneducated with deafness or deaf culture. And having that person come in, they might dismiss something that actually is quite important. So it might be a bit hard having an outside person really fully understand the complaint that might be coming from the inside. So I'm not sure how to resolve that issue. For general complaints I can understand, but an internal complaint, there might be an issue.
I'm sorry, Shelley, what's the difference between a general complaint and an internal complaint?
Well, let's see. I'm trying to think of an example. I can't think of an example for a complaint, but maybe a person can sign, but they continually speak to this deaf person, and the deaf person is trying to get communication and ask them to sign. I don't know if that's a good example. Really, it's not. I'll think of something else and I can send it to you later.
I'm not in disagreement about your concern, but ultimately, I'm hopeful that the person that would come in as an ombudsman is benevolent and wants to do what's good for everyone and would take an independent view and consider all viewpoints. And so, from my perspective, it might not be perfect, but there is a time where moving conflicts outside of the internal stage and having somebody come in from a fresh perspective could be helpful. And so I don't see a downside to it. It's not going to be perfect. Typically, when you come to some sort of compromise, maybe nobody's happy, but it is a compromise. And, we have seen what I would call incivility within the agency, and I think this is an attempt to move towards civil engagement where people are being civil. And I'm not saying it's wrong. I just think some of it was the structures that were missing to enable those things to not happen.
And I think someone from the outside is would come without a bias and would be more impartial, which would be very helpful to both sides.
What I would suggest is the fact that there's a lot of discussion of it kind of means that there's probably more need for further discussion. So if you had said that and everybody said, yeah, I think you're right, Bill, we don't need one, let's move on, I think that would be a strong indicator. But I think there's some, I see a lot of nods in the audience people are acknowledging that these issues exist, and so I don't think there's anything wrong with us continuing as a board to pursue this as something. This is preventative. We're not trying to cause any problems. We're just trying to keep the agency stable. We've come a long way. Superintendent Reichman was telling me that I've been on the board 5 years. I was surprised because it seemed shorter than that, but there's been a lot that's gone on in the past 5 years, and I'll just tell you. And for the agency to move forward for the sake of the kids, we can get through it again, but it wouldn't be in the kids' best interest because everything comes to a standstill. So again, I don't have an answer that it's the right thing, but I think it's worth exploring for the sake of helping the agency have an outlet. And you know what? If people say, I don't think they're independent, I don't want to use them, well then that would be part of their purvey in terms of how they decide to resolve the conflict.
Mark, would I have your authority to expand the committee a little bit then?
Yes.
Terrific.
Go ahead.
Okay, this is Shelley. I do want to add, I did speak with several deaf staff, and sometimes they feel that they cannot disclose maybe to a hearing person because that hearing person may not understand them. They may not be on the same level as them. So they want to focus on the complaint, focus on the problem. You know, of course that doesn't matter if you're hearing or you're deaf. You want to focus on the situation and you want to work on that. And I totally understand. And I agree with the outside person who is neutral and doesn't have any connections. I definitely like that idea. But the concern is, suppose a hearing person is brought in and then you have a deaf person there and they have an issue with each other. Usually the hearing person will have that connection with the other hearing person involved. And then the deaf person, they might say, oh, they don't understand. The hearing person might say, the deaf person doesn't understand. So that's just kind of one of my concerns. Yes, we want to make sure they're neutral, for sure. We want to make sure there's no bias either way towards the deaf person or the hearing person. I hope I'm making sense, but it's just a concern that I do have.
Can I add to what Shelley's concern, I think, is getting at is culturally that if you have two hearing people in a room, they have a bond. If you have two hearing people and a deaf person who uses a different language in the room, there is a different kind of dynamic. It would be the same if you had two English-speaking people and somebody who came in speaking Spanish or German or Japanese. There's a different dynamic. And I think approaching it from a non-cultural bias, or at least having a neutral person that has that cultural sensitivity, I think is really kind of what she's trying to get at.
You know, this is Gordon. I really do need to agree with Shelley on that because same would go with the blind community. That person that would be trying to mediate or work as an independent person hearing issues at hand from the blind community, or who were not familiar with blindness, excuse me, that would really be a difficult position to be in. And because the average layperson, I'm not saying that an ombudsman would be necessarily a layperson, and they could have great skills in areas of negotiation and counseling, but to not understand the community, not understand blindness, would certainly be a detriment to someone who's trying to make decisions based upon that community, within that community.
Well, are you guys saying then that we need two ombudsmen and one blind and one
That's not what I'm
deaf or
saying.
hearing impaired?
That's not what I'm saying, Bill. I'm saying more that you just have to make sure that whoever you hire is qualified and familiar with the communities at hand.
Right, that they have some kind of understanding and sensitivity to the, whether it is a student or a parent or a staff person that has a visual impairment or is deaf, that they just have that sensitivity to those two unique communities.
Or that they don't have an insensitivity.
Exactly.
Well, there's a difference, though, right? So wouldn't it just be that they're not insensitive to it would be ideal, rather than that there's, I mean, I know we're playing with language here, but the point is finding somebody who is, I mean, sensitivity isn't the eye of the beholder, right? So what you consider sensitive will be of your own nature to some extent, as compared to somebody who is not insensitive, which frankly brings me back to my whole concept of, if they're benevolent, they should be sensitive. Or not insensitive, I should say.
I do think that there needs to be a little bit more of awareness, though.
Can you define that? So that's going to be the issue. I understand what you mean, but can you, I mean, some of this comes down to a very practical matter. If you have an escalating conflict, ideally you would love to find somebody who comes in who's very sensitive, but on the flip side, if the house is burnt down before we can get the fire hose here, that's not a good thing.
I can go from the standpoint of, the agency I work for has an ombudsman, and that process works, okay? But the agency also has let's call it a watchdog agency, that clients can go through that route instead of going. We have a client assistance program, and there's more of an advocate type of a role, so that they can bring somebody from that program into the meeting with the ombudsman.
Well, I'm not sure that that specificity's been there. I mean, nobody said that somebody who wanted somebody to be a support or something like that can't
But
come.
that's in our statutes federally,
Well-
so that client assistance program, and I don't know that the Department of Ed has something similar on that level that the states have to then carry out.
Well, that's what Bill's committee's trying to figure out.
Sue Kay, would it be possible for example, one of the gentlemen I'm interested in hiring is a retired police chief. Or whoever we hire, could they go through some sensitivity training with both the deaf and blind cultures?
I would be open to that. I think that would be a possibility, yes.
Would that meet the concerns that you have?
Yes, maybe.
Okay.
I would think a sensitivity training possibly could. However, we would need to test them after that sensitivity training to see, if they pass our sensitivity test.
Can you codify that sensitivity test?
I think more of a pre-post understanding. What they're walking in with and what they're leaving with, I think would be
You mean the ombudsman or the other people?
the other people.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not trying, but ultimately, this is all predicated on the assumption that the ombudsman does a good job of mediating the conflict. So, I mean, you know what I'm saying?
I do.
It's kind of like saying, let's hire a lawyer and make sure that lawyer's going to do lawyering. I mean, that's what they're supposed to do. So it's like we're hiring an ombudsman, so they do ombudsmanship. So we're kind of trying to predefine. I mean, the assumption is benevolence and competence, right? I mean, Bill, please don't get us somebody who's incompetent or insensitive. And then, other than that, we would put, so I get what their concerns are. I'm just trying to get the threshold of what that is. I will tell you, whatever ombudsman Bill provides is better than our current one.
Agreed.
So, at some point, you might get good enough and then refine what you can get. But the absence, if there is an escalating conflict, will be a bad outcome. So, saying in surgery is the enemy of good is better. So sometimes, when you push it too far. So I'm not trying to say we shouldn't strive for excellence.
And I don't think we need to define it to the absolute last detail. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm just looking for somebody who's aware that there is unique needs with both of these communities that they can be neutral about.
Sure.
I'd like to add.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry I have to go, but I really appreciate this discussion. Maybe what I'll do is we'll form this committee, and then we can even contact Sue Kay and Shelley and get some further input from them.
I'd agree. So
And Mike as well.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, but I do have to go.
there is an issue, though, about the size of the committee relative to sunshine laws. So you need to decide whether or not you want to agendize those meetings.
Okay.
So you can talk
Yeah,
to them in
right.
consultation, but even that then becomes deliberation in a non-public forum. So that's my only comment. As you expand, you might eventually, then it might just have to become a board item because you're getting to the point where you've got 5 of the 9 board members. So you're essentially having a board meeting. So
But I think
So it could be 3 or fewer, is that right?
correct.
I also think there are outside agencies that could consult as effectively and who do that.
So my advice would be to send Bill that
can
information
do
so
that.
him and his committee can pursue that further.
Thank you so much,
you,
guys.
Bill.
Bye.
Shelley, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I do like that idea of having some type of advocate. I think it would be important to have someone there. It can be a very stressful situation to go to those type of meetings. Very overwhelming. It would be nice to have someone acting as an advocate and just to have options for those who might act as advocate.
Agree 100%. So. Okay. Bill was not able to put that to sleep despite his initial introduction to that content. Item 6.06, approval of donations. The donations are listed.
I move that we approve the donations.
I second that motion.
I assume we send them thank yous. Okay. All in favor in accepting the donations?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, next is 7.01, call to the public for non-agenda items. I have one sheet. Have there been any additional, Leticia? Okay, this is Richard McLaughlin, PDSD's 50th anniversary.
Do you mind passing this out to the board members?
This is a draft. It gives you an idea of what the PDSD 50th anniversary might look like. The names on here can change. This performing arts center that we have, I propose that we change the name and we dedicate it in memory of someone who has passed on. I was thinking we could dedicate this to Leonardo and Andrea. The two of them were in an accident. They were killed by a drunk driver. They were athletes. They were very involved in sports, and they were former students of PDSD. They graduated from PDSD, so it would be nice to honor them and name this center after them. The football field is already named after Jerry Welk, and the West Hall building, I think it would be nice if the name could become the Mona Kitson Hall. She was a teacher who worked here as a 5th grade teacher. She worked here in the elementary school for many, many years. And Marion Bend was also a teacher here. I think it would be nice to rename the North Hall after her. If we change these names, of course, the names would have to be approved by the board according to policy ASDB 99 and 99R. Of course, the board would have to approve those name changes. I propose that we create a committee, come up with those names, and then at the next board meeting, this can be something that is discussed, and Superintendent Annette Reichman can approve these, and we can go on with the names and have those changed in February of next year for PDSD's 50th anniversary. I think it would be a great idea to honor those who have worked here, those who retired, students who contributed a lot during their time here at PDSD. I think it would be great to have buildings named after those people. You can see the different names that I have here. This is just a draft that I'm proposing for now. If it is approved, if you are interested in creating a committee, the committee will be formed and we will be able to talk about this at the next ASDB board meeting, which will be in Phoenix in September. We can give you our proposed draft. As long as it's approved by the board and the superintendent, it would be great to have this starting in February. And this is just an idea that I have for the PDSD 50th anniversary.
I do have one comment. This is Shelley.
It's a
Dr.
non-agendized
Sims.
item, so we don't make public comment on a non-agendized item.
But could I add for next month?
Now we're gonna get to that, so
Yeah, okay.
call to items for the next meeting. So,
Okay,
there you
thank
go. Shelley?
Okay, so I would like to add
Discussion about the name.
approval for a committee discussion for the next board meeting.
Regarding the 50th anniversary and the names of the buildings. Okay?
Correct, yes,
Okay,
thank you.
that's a great suggestion. Any other issues that, anything else that people would want on the agenda for next meeting? Okay. All right, the most anticipated part of the meeting. 8.0 action item adjournment.
I move that we adjourn this meeting.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, everybody. Have a great summer. See you in September.